Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, March 17th, 2026. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Have you been out for a green bagel? Have you dyed your river green? Got green anything? I'm looking down. I was aware of this. Inside of this mug is sort of semi-green. I have green tea going on. As a matter of fact, this is the last of the China box of the international teas of the world that's got sent at some point in the last couple of months. So I'm making my way through it. There's no more, for all the tea in China, there's none left. I drank it all. Everything in the China box is gone. And, well, what can I tell you? Lots going on here today. People sharing their St. Patrick's Day greetings online. I note Adam Bonin sharing a picture with everybody of, a still frame from The Fugitive, this being much shared as well. A more famous one, actually featuring Harrison Ford, the star of that film, in disguise and evading the U.S. Marshals. I can't believe that this is such an anti-law enforcement message that he's giving out. How dare he? You remember that scene where he disappears into the crowd. Maybe you remember that scene. It was 500 years ago. So you could absolutely be a working adult and be like, no, that's one of those old movies that comes on TV or whatever when my parents are watching, and I don't watch it. But anyway, if you remember, it turns out that, former senator and somewhat disgraced figure, generally speaking, Roland Burris, who briefly occupied what was Barack Obama's Senate seat from Illinois after his ascension to the presidency, apparently makes a cameo appearance, or I don't know what the criteria for being a cameo is, but they took actual parade footage at some point and cut it into the movie, and he's in there, and Adam loves sharing this, and it's fun to see. And that Roland Burris is some kind of lad to be running around out there because he's dead now. And so, therefore, I guess it would be a magic trick beyond my imagining. All right. Well, we'll see where we go from here. Plenty to cover today. Lots of new developments. And also a piece shared with us thanks to Darwin Darko, making his appearance once again as a senior military correspondent. So we'll see if we can't make sure that gets some airplay today, and we'll make our way through the news story is set aside for the day. All right, it's not a very impressive start so far. All right, I'm going to have to organize my thoughts, but there's so many and so many directions to go in. I don't know if I had time last night to organize mentally a top priority in terms of where to start. We'll start, I suppose, though, in the Persian Gulf, where there's a war going on. You may have noticed this thing. And I've seen a couple mentions of these stories, and I have got a better picture of what's going on of late. But I was, if you might have been too, perhaps startled. Well, it's the Trump administration. Maybe not startled, but certainly unhappy to find out that at the moment when they are perhaps most needed, the minesweepers of the United States Naval Fleet have all been redeployed or deactivated from the Persian Gulf, which is, of course, one of the places where I guess we would be where we might most expect to find ourselves, or anybody, targeted by seagoing mines. And, I don't know. Oh, yes, right. And I am also reminded, by the way, as we begin things here, Justice Sensitive, what happened with our tornado warning yesterday? We ended the show yesterday, if you were listening. As we were trying to wrap things up, the phones started blaring tornado warnings. I didn't see nothing. And that's good. I mean, you're not hoping to. Although sometimes you're like, well, now I'm all on alert here, and I want to see some action here, even though you don't. Not a tornado. Anyway, around here, the tornadoes are relatively minor versus Midwestern tornadoes, where people will say you don't really ever want to see one of those. You will if you hang around long enough, but you don't want to. And I didn't really want to. Anyway, there were, in fact, tornadoes in the area, not really near us. We have a very weird spot. We occupy a very weird place along the river and in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, such that weather bands tend to go around us. It's very lucky, really. And yesterday there were several bands of intensive rainstorms that, once again, were just moving southwest to northeast, and we just live in this slot where they coast up, and then they hit the Potomac River, and sometimes it carries them, more easterly. We miss a lot. So we got lucky again and missed it. I imagine La Plata, Maryland had to have been hit by tornadoes, because La Plata, Maryland is a tornado magnet. I don't know what it is. I guess it's the other side of the Chesapeake Bay and the mouth of the Potomac, and all the storms that manage to go make it across, reorganize, or pick up speed or intensity on their way across, and then they land in La Plata. But we're okay. Everything is fine. And that means we can bring you these stories about the redeployment of all of the minesweepers from the Persian Gulf. And we've mentioned it a couple times and sort of pondered how could that have been that within a very few months, if not just a couple of weeks, prior to launching an attack against Iran, you could remove your minesweepers from the Persian Gulf, knowing that one of their tried and true methods for retaliating against an attack like that is to try to close the Strait of Hormuz. We've been over that 100 times. Although all the reporting is that Trump and his advisors simply discounted the entire idea of the Iranians trying to close the Strait of Hormuz. Apparently, the logic, such as it is, was that Trump believed that closing the Strait of Hormuz was, at least economically, as disadvantageous, if not more disadvantageous, to the Iranians than it is to everyone else suffering from a lack of supply of oil and therefore higher oil prices. They survive on the sale of oil. And if the strait was closed, even if it was closed only to non-Iranian shipping, it would still cause a great deal of trouble. And closing the strait means obstructing it in ways that, for Iran, wouldn't necessarily make it very easy to actually get Iranian ships through. If you're mining the strait, then nobody goes through. If you are trying to close the strait selectively, you need a much bigger, stronger naval force and naval presence in the water there than Iran is able to muster. So he just figured they weren't going to do it, even though they've attempted doing it several times in recent historical past. So, I don't know. They weren't ready for it. And then, we've speculated if Vladimir Putin had wanted to weaken American ability to impose its will in the Persian Gulf during an Iran strike or not, probably the first thing that they would do, if I could just dictate the terms, I mean, nobody would do this, but if I could hypnotize the president of the United States, I would tell him, take all your minesweepers out of the Persian Gulf and then start a war with Iran. And then they did, and no one can really explain why that would happen. So, all right, I don't know if this will necessarily do it, but there's a collection of stories, and I grabbed a bunch of them, and we'll try and get through some of them to give us some idea of why that would have happened, because there is a real logistical and military reason for having done it. And I don't know what to tell you about the wisdom of any of them, but let me grab a hold of this one here, which I think gives us a quick look. And now, where's the one from? There was a very weirdly named, there we are, TWZ.com that as a source that I wanted to make sure was still there. But I have a brief piece that's here in Yahoo News, illustrated with a fascinating photo, by the way. If you'd like to take a look, I'll be providing you with the link later on, but if you're listening live and you just can't wait, as I said, it's in Yahoo News. It comes from the Navy Times. And the title is, The U.S. Navy Decommissioned Middle East Minesweepers Last Year. Here's what they did. Not necessarily why they did it, although there's a little bit of that in here and elsewhere. Riley Cedar, C-E-D-E-R, is the author of the piece. It's from last Thursday, March 12th. The fascinating photo is of a presumably very large ocean-going barge with 4 entire minesweeper ships sitting on its deck. So, it has to be a fairly sizable thing. The minesweepers are smaller craft, but, I mean, I don't know, a boat with 4 other boats on it. That's bound to be a fairly large. We're going to need a bigger boat if you have 5 minesweepers. But if you have 4, you'll be just fine. Anyway, so here are the 4, I guess it should be obvious at this point, now decommissioned, or at least at this point, decommissioned U.S. Navy Avenger-class mine countermeasures. How could you decommission anything named for a popular movie franchise at this point? I don't know. You don't want to give up that kind of PR. But here they are being carried out of the Arabian Gulf, is how it's identified here. It is an alternative name for the Persian Gulf, after all. But interesting that they chose to go with that one. So here's the deal. The U.S. Navy decommissioned half of its Avenger-class mine countermeasure ships last year and began replacing them, that's the thing, with littoral combat ships that possess anti-mine capabilities. Now, if you live in the D.C. area, probably for the last 30 years you've been commuting to work, and if you have WTOP, the news radio station, on, you get bombarded from time to time, appropriations bill time, with advertisements extolling the benefits of the littoral combat ships built by Lockheed Martin and various contractors, and that the 6 people with control over that line item in the appropriations bill are also listening to the news radio, it is thought, on their way to work, and will say, golly, we got to have a couple of those, and then, everything will work out. There's a lot of lobbying radio advertising that used to go on. I don't listen as much these days, but I always kind of marveled at that. That was a very narrow audience. Anyway, so you've been hearing about littoral combat ships for a long time. It's been part of like Navy doctrine for a long time. Littoral is just sort of like close in territorial waters, within a certain number of miles offshore of, so rather than deep sea combat craft, I guess, like old line battleships that kind of went out the door in World War II and shortly thereafter. So a more modern type of ship, not a dedicated minesweeper like this Avenger class, which, specially, it's a lightweight thing, specially constructed, not got a magnetic signature to it. So these magnetic mines aren't drawn to it while they're able to, while they're trying to pull them out of the water. But the littoral combat ships, not dedicated minesweepers, but they have anti-mine capabilities, which may or may not, have the same kind of results. We haven't been doing a lot of counter-mine activity lately with them. And I think they're mostly untested combat-wise, and I think also untested in their anti-mine capabilities. But on paper, though you're decommissioning your Avenger class, you've got the littoral combat ships. Naval mine warfare is a major tenet of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy military doctrine, according to a 2017 Office of Naval Intelligence report, and it looks to be a factor in the ongoing Iran war. Now, you can't blame Donald Trump for not knowing what was happening with Navy intelligence in 2017 because he was president then. And as you know, that means he was playing golf and not paying any attention to what was going on. If you wanted him paying attention, you needed to catch his commentary on Twitter when someone else was president. That's how you know what's going on. Anyway, Iran reportedly began laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz this week. And by the way, for the Jeffrey Epstein files people, including Donald Trump, I know their ears perked up. It's laying mines, not miners. And you can go back to sleep now. And Iran reportedly began laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz this week, although they've done it before, with U.S. Central Command announcing Tuesday that it had struck 16 Iranian mine layers. The U.S. remains confident that its new phase of mine countermeasure capabilities can successfully thwart mine warfare. On paper, it's supposed to happen this way. The Littoral Combat Ship MCM Mission Package, I like that. Is that like Marine Counter Mine? I don't know what the first M is necessarily, but I'll bet Darwin does. But the Mission Package, as they call it, is a sophisticated suite of manned and unmanned systems designed to locate, identify, and neutralize sea mines at a safer distance from minefields than the Avenger-class MCMs, a Navy official told Military Times on condition of anonymity, although, why on condition of anonymity? The new kind of anti-mine technology is better than the old kind of anti-mine technology, said a spokesperson for the Pentagon that bought the technology. Probably, that's official line. I don't really know why you have to be anonymous to do that, but they called him off hours, and I guess maybe the Military Times might have been banned from the Pentagon for not being sufficiently pro-Trump or something. So in order for them to get a comment from someone, I bet that was it, actually. There's really no other reason for anonymity here, except that, it may be Hegseth policy that Military Times isn't supposed to be getting quotes from people. I want you to just keep that in the back of your mind as we're considering everything that these guys do. So, all right. That sounds interesting, too. A safer distance, and they can do it with unmanned craft. Sounds extremely expensive, but even with the specialized design and procedure for the minesweepers, it's still a dangerous thing, heading into a minefield and working in close proximity to the mines and removing them from, decommissioning those mines or removing them from the water. And if anything goes wrong, I guess you'd rather have it happen to an unmanned craft than a manned one. So, but I like the idea of a MCM mission package that you get. It's almost, I feel like it will sell you the Littoral Combat Ship with MCM mission package and Kung Fu grip. And all you have to do is the Navy download our app, and you can have a month free, and then after that, for $999 million a month or whatever it is, low price, you can retain access to it, and then you can sign up for premium and keep track of all the mines that you've removed and get stats about your success rate and capture photos of yourself with decommissioned mines, those sorts of things, all those extras. Independence class littoral combat ships equipped with the mine countermeasures mission package. There's a link to this. Maybe it tells a little bit about the package. Might be interesting. Began arriving in the U.S. Fifth Fleet. That's the Persian Gulf area would be part of the Fifth Fleet last year to replace the decommissioned minesweepers in Bahrain. The USS Canberra. Oh, Canberra gets a ship named after it after all, huh? Is there a Canberra in the United States that it's named after? I don't see why we would be naming it after the Australian Canberra, but, perfectly nice people in Australia there. Anyway, it was the first LCS, Littoral Combat Ship, with the MCM package to arrive in the Middle East on May 22nd last year. The USS Santa Barbara and the USS Tulsa, two other littoral combat ships with the MCM package, were also stationed in the U.S. Fifth Fleet as of September 25th of last year, with a yet-to-be-named fourth LCS on its way, according to USNI News. Unnamed, huh? All right, any suggestions? USS Paramus. I don't know. It's the most unlikely, name I can think of. The United, and they're all Virginia names or New Jersey names in my view. USS Piscataway. Is that really? I don't know. Tulsa, Santa Barbara. They're city. Canberra. Where is that? Does that? Probably I was going to say, does anybody know? The people of Canberra almost certainly do know. I mean, how do you figure this out? I mean, I found the ship, but like, I don't know what state to look in on the map. So I'm like, Canberra, USA. Is there one? And it just brings me to the ship. So I don't know. We'll have to, I wonder if the Wikipedia will tell us. There was previously a Baltimore-class cruiser and later a Boston-class guided missile cruiser named the Canberra. Does it say what it was named for or where Canberra is? The poor people of Canberra, Ohio, I don't know, are beside themselves with the lack of recognition. But so if anybody has any idea, let me know. I'll tell you more about the actual news in the article, though. I think that's probably more important. At any rate, so we've got a fourth one yet to be named, and if you have suggestions about that one, let me know. Unlike the Minesweepers, which have a long history of being battle-tested on account of all the battles we've been in, which is not great, the LCS with the MCM package has never been deployed in combat, which is, I'd rather have a battle-tested one, but then if we could stay out of battles with mines, I guess that's preferable. If the LCS is used during Operation Epic Fury, as it should be, to address Iranian mines, it will be the first. The LCS with the MCM package, I just love that description, possesses similar counter-mine capabilities as Minesweepers, but the fundamental difference is that the LCS operates outside the mine threat zone and deploys counter-mine devices, while the Minesweeper can operate near or directly inside the mine threat zone. Minesweepers boast a non-magnetic signature and low acoustic footprint designed to avoid triggering sea mines, allowing them to operate closer to dangerous areas. They deploy a bevy of resources to destroy and disable moored and bottom mines, including sonar, cable cutters, and mine detonating devices, also known as a ship. It's one of the most famous mine detonating devices there are, but not a very safe one. The U.S. has destroyed in an entire class of Iranian warships, the CENTCOM command says. I don't know whether that's supposed to be just a link to another article, but that's Trump's constant boast, certainly. Beginning in the 1980s, the U.S. manufactured 14 deployable Avenger-class ships in total, according to the Navy. The ships were deployed in the Persian Gulf during the Iran-Iraq War. Does anybody remember that one and what the Iranians tried to do with the, what would they call that thing again? Strait of Hormuz. Yeah, exact same thing. There were also deployments during Operation Desert Shield and Operation Desert Storm. Why? Because it was also thought that perhaps Iraq might deploy mines in the Persian Gulf. And, we tried to stay ready for that. I got a note here from Scott that has a link, and we'll have to see which one it is. Canberra, all right. Well, it does say Canberra is not located in the United States. I mean, I did know that about the Australian Canberra. My question is, if we have a Paris, Texas, is there a Canberra, Kentucky somewhere or something like that? But I guess not. It is, of course, the capital city of Australia, and it's the only Canberra in the U.S. is the USS Canberra, named, all right, there's the answer we're looking for, named to honor the Australian capital. Crikey, I can't believe it. Well, the Australians must be beside themselves with joy and pride, waiting to see how the USS Canberra does in the Persian Gulf. They're not going, but they'll watch it on television. After the Gulf War, U.S. Avenger-class minesweepers participated in efforts to hunt down more than 1,000 mines off Kuwait that Iraq laid. Again, down boy, there was mines, not miners. Retired Navy Captain Sam Howard, who commanded the Osprey-class. We got a lot of classes going on here. Osprey-class USS Raven Mine Hunter. I don't know if that's any different from a minesweeper, but Mine Hunter said there were several ways minesweepers targeted and vanquished vanquished the threat of naval mines. He broke the process down into two categories. This is a process show, after all. There's mine hunting, and then there's mine sweeping, Howard said. Well, he has delivered, technically. He broke it down into two categories. Is there more? Ideally, the Navy would typically rely on airborne countermeasures to accomplish mine hunting, Howard said, such as the MH-53 Sea Dragon helicopter, getting all the jargon today, which used side-scan mine hunting sonar in order to map out what lay beneath the water. This way, fewer ships were put at risk, and helicopters also covered more water at a faster pace. Minesweepers could hunt if they need to, but it would take much longer, and they were slower, and they couldn't cover as much width. In this instance, the ship would use its high-frequency sonar and a tethered remote operating vehicle that could go out and confirm the presence of mines, Howard explained. And again, I know the low-tech way of confirming the presence of mines. Once a large number of mines were identified and mapped, the minesweeper or a helicopter could go about detonating the mines through acoustic or magnetic triggers. Okay, that makes some sense. And explode them or trigger I guess, what else have we got here? I missed the spot here. The detonating those mines through acoustic or magnetic triggers depending on which type of mines are being targeted. I bet the acoustic and magnetic kind. An acoustic device used by a helicopter or a minesweeper would emit noise or a frequency meant to trigger the mines to explode from sound, Howard said. So, interesting, learning a little bit about how those mines themselves work. For electromagnetic detonation, the U.S. Navy would use the Mark 105 hydrofoil magnetic minesweeping sled, he said, unless he's completely full of it. But he did say this, which emits a magnetic field designed to trick mines into exploding. That is some trick. For moored mines, those anchored to the seabed and attached to tethers, well, there's a totally different method. We'll hear more about it after this.
Hi, Kagro in the Morning listeners. This is Rebecca Romans, longtime listener and longtime supporter of the show. Do you love your non-corporatized, completely independent, commercial-free Kagro in the Morning show? Do you stand out among the crowd at the office water cooler when discussing current events because of all the up-to-the-minute news you've been brought by David Waldman? Then it's time to give back a little. David relies on contributions from listeners like you and me to keep this show on the air. Patreon.com is among the easiest ways to make secure recurring monthly donations to support the show. Patreon.com/KagroX will bring you straight to his donation page, where you can sign up for any convenient tier you like. A mere $5 a month. You'll never miss it. Works out to about 25 cents a show. That means that David is making 12.5 cents an hour, which, by coincidence, is exactly what the GOP wants to lower the federal minimum wage to. Once again, David is ahead of the curve. If Patreon.com doesn't sound like your kind of thing, there's always PayPal, or even the Square Cash app. Any way you choose to donate, please choose to donate. And thank you on behalf of David and the rest of us listeners. Thank you very much.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Would you like to know more about the USS Canberra? Perhaps more about littoral combat ships, or just different ways that you can patrol for and disarm mines in, I don't know, let's say the Strait of Hormuz for the fourth time in 30 years. It's kind of important. I don't know. I mean, it's not absolutely necessary that we know everything about this, but I do think that this will come into play. We'll hear about it in the news and the different methodologies, and then people who are listening to the show can understand how ridiculous it sounds when something happens and suddenly every blogger, influencer, and podcaster is a minesweeper expert. You'll at least be able to say, I know where he was getting this information from, and it's no more than you could find in Yahoo News. They don't really know anything. So before that happens, we'll make sure that we don't really know anything. Aha! But we'll not know it first. So we learned about the interesting topic of electromagnetic detonation of magnetic mines for moored mines, the ones that are anchored to the seabed and attached to a tether hovering near the water's surface. a minesweeper would tow a series of cables and cutters behind it to cut the tether and make the mine rise to the water's surface, at which point it would be destroyed by various means. I think beating it with hockey sticks is probably among the dumber ways to do it, but, it's one that could work. The USS Devastator, I bet that's Trump's favorite ship. The USS Dexterous, I don't think he cares about that. USS Gladiator, that may also be a favorite. And the USS Sentry were all stationed in Bahrain in the Middle East and put out to pasture. I mean, probably not pasture, but anyway, that's the figurative way of putting it. Put out to pasture in 2025, that's just last year, after each serving for over 30 years, leaving only 4 remaining minesweepers in the U.S. Navy. That's not actually the end of the sentence, in the U.S. Navy fleet, but we understood, I think fleet is really understood there. Anyway, and those guys are in Japan, as I understand. So it's not entirely, the whole story isn't told by saying, well, we had a whole bunch of minesweepers there, but then we just said leave or decommission them and hauled them out on the surface of this gigantic boat. But it did happen. But it didn't happen with no replacement plan in mind. There actually was a plan. Somebody else probably made it, and that's why it was available for use by the Trump administration's Navy. But they're not there yet, or not all of them yet, and one of them doesn't even have a name, and they've never been tested. So it's only half the story to say, take all your minesweepers out. But it is still true that means there's none, I think, in the Persian Gulf. They're waiting outside, which makes a certain amount of sense. If they're worried about the mines in the Strait of Hormuz, you can worry about those from just the other side of the Strait of Hormuz, in the Gulf of Oman, rather than the Persian Gulf. But I think this sort of remote unmanned technology that they have that allows them to sweep for and disarm mines from a distance means that our super expensive new littoral combat ships are just kind of remaining at a considerable distance from, the littoral combat. So it seems a little odd for those of us who have been listening to ads for 30 years about how they were just going to go in and kick everybody's ass if we just dropped a couple trillion on each one of these things. Anyway, we'll see. Those remaining Avenger-class minesweepers that we still have are currently forward deployed to the U.S. 7th Fleet at U.S. Fleet Activities Sasebo, Japan. It's Sasebo, if you want to look that up. It remained unknown Thursday if the Pentagon intended to forward deploy minesweepers from Japan to the Middle East in support of Operation Epic Fury, but the Navy was not backtracking on their plans toward modernizing mine countermeasure forces. The Navy has no plans to recommission any Avenger-class mine countermeasure ships, a Navy official told Military Times. I don't know whether they think they would need them or whether they're totally covered with the littoral combat ships with mine or MCM package and a totally downloadable app and remote control Kung Fu grip. But it seems like if you have 4 boats, even if they're aging out of service, and they were just there. So late last year, they were all, patrolling for mines. Maybe in a war situation, you say, how about a little extra help? I don't know. But I'm not certain what Navy doctrine is on this. All right. So as I said, there were a couple such articles. And there's one here that promises perhaps a little bit more insight into why this happened this way, not just that it did. This comes from slashgear.com, about which I know nothing, but it sounds super cool. And their picture illustrating the photo, the piece, has a giant explosion in it. So that got that going for him. Jonathan H. Cantor is the article's author. This is a February 10th piece. It's this year. It's not that old. Why U.S. Navy Avenger-class minesweepers have been pulled from the Middle East. And I hope that this article is more than, well, they didn't want them anymore, so that's why. But you never know, because sometimes these stories don't deliver on their headlines. The U.S. Navy has a lot of different types of warships. So far, so good. Not particularly informative, but yes, true. And while its aircraft carriers, destroyers, and different types of submarines are well known, they're hardly the only vessels in service. In addition to the better-known ships, the Navy also operates minesweepers, or as they're technically known, mine countermeasure ships. I did learn something here. That's MCM. So, the MCMs, or the LCSs with MCM packages, is what we're dealing with now. As the name implies, these are ships designed specifically to clear naval mines from critical waterways, and they've been around a long time. As of this writing, it just says as of writing, though, the Navy operates 4 Avenger-class MCMs, having retired the remaining 10 of its 14-ship fleet. The vessels entered service in the 1980s. That doesn't seem that old, but it means I'm pretty old, I guess. And were used during Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm. These, of course, being used not in the desert, but in the ocean. As of early 2026, the remaining 4 Avenger-class ships are forward deployed in Japan, though an additional 4 had remained in operation in the Persian Gulf, where, we're currently having mine trouble, until they were decommissioned late the previous year. The U.S., there they are named again, the fun names, Devastator, Dexterous, Gladiator, Sentry. In January of this year, the Navy contracted a heavy lift vessel to carry these ships out of the sea, removing them from the Middle East entirely, which is, I guess, the preferable way of removing them from the Middle East besides blowing them up and sinking them. There are several reasons for this move, but chief among them is the age of the Avenger class and the fact that they've been replaced with highly complex Independence-class littoral combat ships. Mine clearing is still a vital function of the U.S. Navy operations, but time in service for the Avenger class has largely come to an end. Removing them from the Persian Gulf was in accordance with U.S. Navy force transition efforts, and it required a great deal of planning and support to finalize their departure. All 4 are set to be dismantled and scrapped. I guess the thing that interests me about the giant boat that carries them, one, it's a civilian cargo craft that they contracted. So the Navy doesn't maintain these things, or maybe they do, but they weren't using one here. But the other thing is, I'd be very interested. Probably you wouldn't, but maybe there's an article somewhere. Has it struck you yet? I've got 4 boats in the Persian Gulf, but I don't need them in the Persian Gulf anymore. Let's get them out of the Persian Gulf. How can we get these boats out of the Persian Gulf? Well, these are the kind of boats that float on water, yeah? Yeah. Could we sail them out of the Persian Gulf? Well, I don't know. The Straits of Hormuz may be closed with mines. Well, these are minesweepers. I guess of all the boats that you're removing from the Persian Gulf, and you shouldn't be terribly worried about what's happening at the end of the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, the 4 minesweepers, or maybe it was it would be too ironic for them to be sunk by mines in their way to retirement. And if they do hit but they weren't worried about that then. So I don't know what the reason is. Do they save on gas? Is that, the crew went home? That's possible? I don't know. But the idea of we've got 4 boats we need to sail out of this body of water. Why don't we sail another boat in there and then, I guess, go to an area where we got a crane and then lift these other boats and put them on the other boat, and then that boat will sail out. I guess I need a Navy person to explain to me why you do it that way. But there were a lot of reasons for the moves, the change. As we said, we're introducing the new Independence-class littoral combat ships. They still got to be able to do mine sweeping. Removing these ships, though, from the Persian Gulf was in accordance with U.S. Navy force transition efforts. Required a great deal of planning. Other than sail them out of there, I think that would have been better. All 4 are set to be dismantled and scrapped. They haven't been yet. Maybe they weren't in good shape, and they said rather than repair them to sail them elsewhere and scrap them, maybe that's it. Now, how do these Avenger and Independence-class ships compare? Well, the Independence-class ships are much weirder looking and shaped funny. They're shaped weird. They are trimarans. As a matter of fact, the U.S. Navy began operating its fleet of 19 Independence-class littoral combat ships in 2010, after, again, a 20-year ad campaign for them. The vessels are designed for high-speed operation in the littoral zone, that is to say close to shore. They feature an angular trimaran 3-hulled design. they can reach speeds of up to 52 miles per hour. And they can ram into a mine very quickly. And they are capable of carrying out numerous operations, including chasing down pirates. That does seem important, actually. In terms of mine clearing, Independence-class ships are modular and carry a variety of systems, including a mine countermeasures module. I'd like to see the pirate countermeasure module. I think that would be cool. You know, Jolly Roger flag, cannons, all that sort of thing. A plank, I would guess. Others include anti-submarine warfare and surface warfare modules. So it's like a Transformers, right? What kind of war are you having? Reconfigure yourself this way. Go have that war. Uh-oh, here comes some submarines. Well, reconfigure again. I don't know how long that takes, but LCS, they have to put them all on a big boat and take them elsewhere and then put the packages on and send them back. LCS mine countermeasures utilize aviation and uncrewed surface and underwater vehicles with an assortment of sensors. These work in tandem to detect and neutralize a variety of mines in a littoral environment, are deployed outside of the area of the ship, keeping it safe from potential mines. Working together, they can isolate beach and buried mines along the shore as well. For comparison, Avenger-class ships have a top speed of around 16 miles an hour versus 52. And they operate a remote mine countermeasure system with a remotely operated vehicle. These work together to find, classify, and neutralize a variety of mines. While capable, Avenger-class ships had limited operability in littoral zones, couldn't detect the same variety of mines as Independence-class vessels. The older MCMs were also considerably smaller and constructed of wood and fiberglass, while Independence-class vessels are composed primarily of aluminum. It's a big beer can. The newer class of ships utilize a technologically superior mine countermeasure system. It's been updated significantly since its introduction, even, ensuring mission operability improves as the U.S. Navy's LCS fleet continues to fulfill its many duties around the world until, like, in 30 years, we get rid of those on a slightly larger cargo boat. Okay, so you get in the sense of what we'll be hearing on CNN if there's any actual littoral combat coming up. Good. Now you'll understand all the terminology. There's another one up here from TWZ.com. And yeah, I guess just by way of what happened to the 4 that they put on the boat, U.S. Navy minesweepers assigned to Middle East have been moved to the Pacific. 2 of the 3 littoral combat ships that had taken over the minesweeping role in the Middle East have just appeared, though, in Malaysia. Okay. Oh, so it may be that it's not the 4 ships that were being carried out that ended up in the Pacific, although that may also be true, but rather that the littoral combat ships that are meant to be operating counter mine measures, counter MCM packaged module, what have you, are not in the area of the Middle East. They're assigned there, but they are in Malaysia instead for some reason. Joseph Trevithick and Howard Altman wrote this again for TWZ.com. Is that going to tell me what TWZ is anywhere? Yeah, I'd have to go searching for it. Great picture of the trimaran hull of one of these funky-looking littoral combat ships. I guess they're very stealthy in their angular design as well. This one is the USS Santa Barbara. The U.S. Navy, we are told here, Independence-class littoral combat ships USS Tulsa and Santa Barbara are configured for minesweeping duties and they've appeared in a port in Malaysia. Both of these ships were last known to be forward deployed in the Middle East. Oh, okay, they were there, but now they're out of there, which also seems to be counterintuitive. But I guess, again, with remote minesweeping capabilities, the idea of leaving them pretty much anywhere you put them in port in the Persian Gulf, they are reachable by Iranian missiles and drones. And in Malaysia, not so much. I don't know whether they can operate a remote mine sweeping operation from Malaysia, but that's where they are at the moment. Everybody's resting up. Both of these ships were last known to be forward deployed in the Middle East, having arrived in Bahrain in the past year or so to take the place of the group of now decommissioned Avenger-class mine hunters. Now, as Iranian attacks on commercial ships have caused a virtual halt to maritime traffic through the highly strategic Strait of Hormuz, these ships have emerged thousands of miles away. The extent to which Iran has seeded naval mines in the strait already is unclear, but this remains a huge threat to the future security of the waterway and will have to be taken into account in any future effort to reopen this critical waterway, obviously. A spotter in Malaysia posted pictures of the Tulsa and the Santa Barbara, probably not supposed to be doing that, which are said to have been taken today. This was what's the date on this piece? The 15th, Sunday. All right, so the picture is said to be taken on Sunday at the North Butterworth Container Terminal. Sounds like a syrup bottle. Butterworth Container Terminal. In the port of Penang in Malaysia. Mike Yao, an Australia-based defense and aviation reporter, very proud of the Canberra, no doubt, was among the first to call attention to the particular significance of the images. TWZ has reached out for more information, but who knows what they're going to be allowed to see. There's a embedded tweet of some pictures of the ships in port. The USS Tulsa and the Santa Barbara are among, of course, the select number of Independence-class LCSs fitted with a mine countermeasures mission package or module. In its current form, the package includes towed mine hunting sonar for the ships, common unmanned surface vehicles, CUSV, with mine sweeping gear and mine detection and neutralization systems carried by embarked MH-60 Seahawk helicopters. We will come back to this configuration later on. That is to say, they have a flat area on the rear deck of these LCS ships, helicopter landing pad, so they carry their own helicopters with them. That seems pretty cool. When it comes to why the ships are now in Malaysia, TWZ also reached out to U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, of course, which directed us to the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet. We were then directed by 5th Fleet back to CENTCOM. This is exciting. CENTCOM is the top U.S. military command for operations in the Middle East. 5th Fleet is the Navy's numbered fleet in the Middle East, with its commander dual-hatted as head of Naval Forces Central Command, NAVCENT. 5th Fleet and NAVCENT are headquartered in Manama? We didn't figure out the pronunciation of the city in Bahrain. Manamana, in the Persian Gulf, of course. We have reached out to the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Indo-PACCOM. They actually call it that as well. Pictures available through the U.S. military's Defense Visualization Information Distribution Service, DVIDS. That's really interesting. It's our check out our website for photos. Everybody else says check out the U.S. military's Defense Visual Information Distribution Service. Well, they show that Tulsa was in port in Bahrain as of at least February 9th. Separate images also show the Santa Barbara operating in the Persian Gulf on January 30th. The current disposition of the 83rd Independence-class LCS, the Canberra, also forward deployed in the Middle East as of January, is unknown. Whether any mine countermeasure ships may now be headed to the Middle East is also not known. I mean, it's probably a good guess, but you want to, I think we hope to hear that it's unknown. Like, keep that a secret. Keep it under your hat, guys. But it is interesting. Even our new ships that replace the old ships that we took out. Okay, I got a great explanation for why the old ships are going. Why did the new ships leave the Persian Gulf when we were about to need them very badly in the Persian Gulf? And I think the answer may be in Bahrain, they could be hit by drones. In Malaysia, they can't. But can they clear mines either from Malaysia, or are they planning to sail into the Indian Ocean and work from there? The Gulf of Oman and work from there. A review of the satellite imagery in Planet Labs Commercial Archive shows no evidence of any U.S. warships being in port in Manama since February 23rd. The United States and Israel launched their joint operation against Iran on February 28th. That actually sounds like, okay, we did have a plan. Let's get things out of the way. We think, I guess, somebody knew Iranian missiles would be landing in Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Abu Dhabi, UAE, what have you. And the U.S. Navy got out of there. But somehow they didn't. Well, I don't know why they would say, well, let's move some of these ships. Which ones? The minesweepers. Okay, fine. Let's get them out of there, sail them through the Strait of Hormuz because, nothing's likely to happen here at the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know how that happens. Moving U.S. warships out of port in Bahrain ahead of the current conflict was a prudent security measure. The Gulf state is well within the range of Iranian missiles, indeed has been hit already, and long-range kamikaze drones, and U.S. military facilities there did subsequently come under attack. The U.S. military's own strikes on Iranian naval vessels in port have underscored the vulnerability of ships sitting pierside. Why the decision was made to then send the Tulsa and Santa Barbara thousands of miles to the east is unknown. A host of factors may have come into play, including the availability of suitable friendly ports and diplomatic considerations. Regardless, at least two-thirds of the warships intended to be available for tasking for mine countermeasure missions in the Middle East are presently in a completely different part of the world. As noted, the Tulsa, the Santa Barbara, and the Canberra were forward deployed to the region in the first place, explicitly to fill gaps left by the decommissioning of the 4 Avenger-class mine hunters last year. The cool named boats are renamed again here. They left the region for good aboard a heavy lift ship in January. There are only 4 Avenger ships left in the entire Navy, all of which are in Japan, which is even further away, and is also slated to be decommissioned in the coming years. How many of the Navy's Independence-class LCSs in total have been configured for mine clearing? Unknown. In addition to the Tulsa, Santa Barbara, and the Canberra, there's the Nina Pinta and Santa Maria. And the 4th named ship, I guess now we know the name, it's the USS Kansas City, being fitted out for this mission with the mission module as of last year. I don't know how long it takes to convert. The Independence-class LCS is a far more advanced ship than the Avenger-class. We learned all about that. I don't think we need to go over that material again. I think that gets us out of this, unless I'll give a quick look at maybe this will answer some of our questions down here. In May of 2025, a top U.S. Navy mine warfare officer gave an unclassified briefing detailing significant ongoing issues. With the LCS mine countermeasures, according to a story published just this past week by Hunter Brook Media. Copies of the briefing slides that the outlet published say that employing the CUSV requires hours of prep time. That's the unmanned vehicles. And that the drone boat's sonar sometimes has trouble spotting threats. That sounds like a huge problem. But that the operators may have no indication of this until data is assessed after a mission, or if there's no boat at the end of the mission. That's data. Visual confirmation of mines using the AN-AQS-20 mine hunting system and space modulator also have proven challenging, even in a relatively benign turbidity of Southern California waters. They say SoCal, believe it or not. Another slide explains the briefing. Also highlighted a number of potential single point failures, both in terms of mine countermeasure systems, including them in the module, and the equipment required to deploy and recover them. So the hardware don't work, the software don't work. Together, the hardware and the software don't work. But we do have slides about it. However, you have to download their app and subscribe in order to be able to see the slides. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, there are giant holes in the boat, and it keeps sinking. No, one of the briefing slides noted that the LCS was designed as a multi-mission platform, and all these other missions reduced time for the ship and mine men to gain proficiency in MCM. So, training your crew, you can do 4 different modules, 3, 4 minutes. You got to train everybody in doing all those things, which means that instead of being full-time trained as a minesweeper crew, about 1/3 or 1/4 of your time is spent on that, or even less, because some of the time is spent on how to change your boat from one thing into another, I guess. To reiterate, the Avenger-class ships were purpose-built for this mission set and had crews trained to match. Mine-clearing operations are slow and complex and carry significant risks, even when carried out by experienced personnel in benign environments. In the context of the current conflict, there have been reports in the past week or so saying Iran has at least attempted to lay mines in and around the Strait of Hormuz and Epstein Island. The U.S. military also says it has been actively targeting mine-laying assets. At the same time, Iran has laid mines in and around the Persian Gulf in the past, and this remains a real point of concern. Iranian anti-ship cruise and ballistic missiles, kamikaze drones, that's really same thing as an anti-ship cruise missile, isn't it? And uncrewed, explosive-laden boats further complicate the threat picture for commercial vessels and any warships attempting to help clear the way. More embedded tweets here about this stuff. As it stands now, U.S. officials have said that American warships are unlikely to begin escorting commercial vessels through the straits for at least some number of weeks. All of them, 52, I think. Convoy operations carry their own risks and would require a host of supporting assets at sea and in other domains, as TWZ has previously explained. Limited availability of mine countermeasures assets would create additional challenges. It remains to be seen how long the Tulsa and Santa Barbara will remain in Malaysia and where they might sail after they depart. I don't know, Persian Gulf? Where the Canberra is currently is still unknown, as is where any other additional mine countermeasure configured ships or whether or not they're on their way to the Middle East. For the moment, at least, a substantial portion of the Navy's minesweeping capacity in the region, amid a major conflict with an opponent experienced in mine warfare, is now thousands of miles away in a completely different part of the world. There is an update from just yesterday. U.S. Navy Commander Joe Hantz must have read this thing and needed to make a comment. A spokesperson for NAVCENT has provided TWZ with the following statement. We don't know anything. Tulsa and Santa Barbara are conducting brief logistical stops in Malaysia. U.S. forces routinely they forgot their wallets in Malaysia on their way to the Persian Gulf, I guess, the first time. They do routinely make port calls in Malaysia as part of our operations, reflecting the close and enduring military cooperation between the United States and Malaysia. They've got gas. We need gas. We pull in every once in a while and fill up. It may be a routine thing, but I don't know, we're having a war elsewhere, and that's not routine. So I was just wondering. It does make a great deal of sense. I'm glad we got that out of the way, and we do hear from an official source that, or a knowledgeable source, I guess, that moving them out of the Persian Gulf ahead of the attacks makes sense. Malaysia, well, we've yet to see. But, I don't know, cause for some concern, I suppose. When we come back, we're done with learning all we need to know forever and ever, I think, about minesweepers until next week when we find out, the name of the device that blew one of them up, and then we'll talk about that. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think we've learned all we possibly can, at least today, and that I'm prepared to read to you about minesweeping operations. But I don't know. I do feel like that will become important, and if you need to play the part of an internet expert about minesweepers or minesweeping capabilities, now you are at least versed enough to, well, you can at least follow the story as other people are telling it. Now, if the crew on any of these ships, whether they are in Malaysia or elsewhere, are making their way toward the Persian Gulf, perhaps full speed away from the Persian Gulf, I don't know, whether they know why they're doing what they're doing or what they're learning about the nature of their mission or the nature of the war to which they may shortly be deployed. I don't know. Ordinarily, we would presume that they were at least reading a little bit about the background in Stars and Stripes, the newspaper for the forward deployed troops and troops around the world. But of course, we also now know that Stars and Stripes, like most of the civilian military covering the Pentagon, are coming under attack by Pentagon leadership. Not only are most mainstream news outlets now banned from Pentagon briefings in favor of right-wing and total weirdo pop-up news sites. It was really incredible. I did see someone tweeting a screenshot the other day of the press list, I guess, that was, or the order in which people were given questions, allowed questions of the Pentagon briefing personnel, and it was like this unbelievable lineup of completely ridiculous, useless right-wing news sources and nothing else. It was really quite amazing, and I can't remember what it was what the comment that they appended to this picture was, it would be a lot easier to find this post if I had that. But anyway, just you could, essentially take my word for it for the moment until I find this thing of who was asking questions. But in a similar vein, they can't shut down these other news outlets directly, but they do have at the Pentagon some editorial and other, physical and jurisdictional and budgetary control over Stars and Stripes, and they're flexing that now. And it is Darwin Darko's contribution today talking about the latest news on, as he puts it here, he sent me this file, Stars and Stripes deathbed. Yeah, it's a little alarming. So let Darwin update you on that situation, and I'll keep scanning for the other piece that I had for you.
Hello there, David. Hello, KITM family. Darwin Darko reporting here, reading not from Stars and Stripes, but an actual article about Stars and Stripes. This one is from NPR, and I'd like to note that the logo on NPR is showing WHY. It's a new campaign they have basically fighting back against the attack on journalism. WHY, asking the question why, and why it's important for journalists to cover stories like this one by Maria Aspen. Pentagon tightens controls over Stars and Stripes after calling it woke. The Defense Department has begun to exert greater control over Stars and Stripes weeks after a top spokesman accused the independent military newspaper of focusing on woke distractions. The Pentagon announced what it calls modernization changes this week. In a memo dated March 9th and effective immediately, according to a copy seen by NPR and first reported by Stars and Stripes on Friday. It's the latest effort by the Pentagon and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to apply extraordinary limits on journalists covering the agency. The memo says that Stars and Stripes will continue to operate with editorial independence. However, it also says that the newspaper must immediately begin implementing the Defense Department's new interim policies and stop publishing several types of content. It also declares that publications' content must be consistent with good order and discipline, which is a phrase used in military justice. Stars and Stripes editor-in-chief Eric Slavin told NPR on Saturday that this phrase makes him particularly concerned for his staff reporters who are members of the U.S. military and who thus can be court-martialed for violations of its Uniform Code of Military Justice, the UCMJ. If they were to complete a story that the Defense Department did not like and did not find consistent with good order and discipline, would they be in legal jeopardy? Slavin said, "We don't know the answer to that." This new memo comes weeks after the Pentagon publicly criticized Stars and Stripes and promised an overhaul of the publication. "We will modernize its operations, refocus its content away from woke distractions that siphon morale, and adapt it to serve a new generation of service members," Chief Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell wrote on X in early January. In an emailed statement on Saturday, Parnell told NPR that the Defense Department is returning Stars and Stripes to its original mission, an independent news source for service members stationed overseas that is by the warfighter and for the warfighter. Parnell added that the changes mean the newspaper will evolve in order to meet industry trends and changes in how new generations of service members consume media. Slavin told NPR that the Defense Department had not responded to his efforts to communicate with them since the Post, and the Pentagon did not send his newspaper the new memo directly. It only issued a statement for the newspaper article about it. The memo said a copy would be sent to Stars and Stripes publisher Max Lederer. Slavin told NPR Lederer did not receive a copy. Slavin said he only found out about the memo on Thursday, 3 days after it was issued, after one of his staffers found it on the Defense Department's website. The newspaper's staff will be meeting Monday morning to figure out how to comply with the memo. Slavin said that he felt deep concern for our staff and our readership about the memo since it restricts what news sources can be published and directs that Stars and Stripes should publish official public relations stories. Stars and Stripes first covered the U.S. military during the Civil War and has been published continuously since World War II. It is owned by the Defense Department but is largely staffed by civilian reporters and editors. By congressional mandate, it has operated independently since the 1990s. But under the Trump administration, the Pentagon has appeared to try to end that congressional mandate. In January, the Defense Department withdrew a federal regulation that underpinned the mandate, according to Stars and Stripes. The new memo published this week says that the newspaper's ombudsman should now send information meant for Congress to the Defense Department first, instead of directly to federal legislators. Stars and Stripes has historically enjoyed bipartisan support, including from President Trump. In 2020, during his first administration, the Pentagon threatened to shut it down before Trump intervened. In a social media post at the time, he called the newspaper a wonderful source of information to our great military. But these days, Trump and his allies have sought to exert far greater direct control over several media entities. And Hegseth's Defense Department has been particularly aggressive on this front. In September, Hegseth unveiled a policy that required media outlets to pledge not to gather information unless defense officials had formally authorized its release. Most established news organizations, including NPR, chose to give up their press passes instead of agreeing to the policy. Press freedom advocacy organizations decried this latest Pentagon memo after Stars and Stripes reported on it this week. Service members and military families rely on Stars and Stripes for independent reporting, not for material shaped or dictated by the very officials the paper is supposed to hold accountable, Tim Richardson, Journalism and Disinformation Program Director at PEN America, said in a statement. The Defense Department's new memo will likely also stifle much of Stars and Stripes' daily news-gathering operations, including its ability to cover the new war in Iran and other combat zones, where its military readers may be deployed. That's because the memo prohibits Stars and Stripes from publishing most stories from wire services like the Associated Press or Reuters. Many news organizations publish stories from such wire services to inform readers about important news they do not have the resources to cover themselves. In the case of Stars and Stripes, that means its readers will not see stories or photos from Iran or other war zones where it does not currently have journalists working. Stars and Stripes also would not be able to utilize wire services to cover lighter but popular news like the upcoming March Madness college basketball tournament or other major sporting events. The memo even explicitly bans Stars and Stripes from publishing comic strips. We do use a lot of those other services to round out our coverage, and it appears that we will be unable to do that, Slavin says. We will need to find other sources of information. So it is carrying on to Stars and Stripes. The crackdown on the press is wild to see that, I've read from Stars and Stripes on several occasions, is because when I was on deployment, this is the newspaper that I would read, that I would get information on what's going on back in the States and different things that concerned us in the military. And, it doesn't even matter if that it's independent. And of course they call it woke because for some strange reason, the truth has a liberal bias. You just can't get away with telling the truth. You just can't get away with reporting things the way they actually are. This is sad to see, the attack here on Stars and Stripes, and it's a great resource. Unfortunately, I don't see a silver lining or a light at the end of the tunnel of this one. So this thing may be going away, at least the way that we know it, and it's going to be useless to even read it, maybe 2-3 years from now. But that's all I have on that, and I appreciate you guys listening, and back to you, David.
All right. Thanks very much for getting us back up to date on this, Darwin. We were checking back in. I wondered whether they were going to be able to exempt Stars and Stripes at all from any of these new Pentagon policies, but I guess not. They just sort of want iron-fisted control over all the information coming out of the Pentagon, whether through military or civilian outlets. And bad news when the troops find that they have no access to news from back home and won't have any idea, of course. I mean, I'm sure they'd be shielded to some extent, and to some extent they're trained not to really key in on things and let it affect their mission. They just focus on what it is that they're doing and staying alive the best that they can. But I assume that they want to hear a little bit about what the reaction is to what they're doing back at home. And even if they maybe worked with the assumption that, well, Stars and Stripes is going to be somewhat careful about perhaps running stories about overwhelming opposition to the war and massive demonstrations in the street or something like that. At least you could get some sense of what's going on. But no longer. Very interesting to see what's going on. As I mentioned to you before heading into this, there was a post on Blue Sky, I think purloined from Twitter, a screenshot from Bill Gruskin. Gruskin is a journalist. Does it say what his outlet is? Not currently, but at any rate, journalist in Salt Lake City, covering from a distance what was going on at the Pentagon, since they won't let any real journalists anywhere near the Pentagon. But I guess watching on television and tracking who's asking questions in one of the recent Hegseth Kane press conferences. First question, he notes, and when was this? Just the other day, March 13th? Yeah, so Friday. First question at the Hegseth Kane presser goes to a reporter from OAN, One America News, right? Okay, super right-wing outlet. Second question goes to the Epoch Times, that weird, like Falun Gong controlled, also ultra right-wing news-ish website. Third question went to Real America's Voice. So basically, it's all Jeff Gannon, Talon News, all the way through. If you're old enough and been around long enough to remember that name and that reference, you know what I'm talking about. But just right-wing news outlets only allowed, and their questions are the only ones allowed. And basically, you can turn off Pentagon news briefings. Bill Gruskin's takeaway from a Pentagon press conference during a war is, I can't even listen to what's going back. I can't listen to the questions. The questions are too dumb to be regarded seriously. The answer is obviously the same. My takeaway is, I'm just going to give you the names of the news outlets for you to get some understanding of how stupid and useless press conferences at the Pentagon are. Much more stupid and useless than is usually the case when they are expected to be handing you propaganda. It's just kind of bizarre. I found that interesting. All right. A couple other things happening along the way, and there's some breaking news, I guess. And it is, how shall we introduce it? Well, I'll introduce it by using Matthew Gertz and his post. Matthew Gertz, of course, not Matt Gaetz. His best line ever is that he's not Matt Gaetz. He's Matt Gertz from Media Matters. And here's what we got. Chris Geidner is, well, let's see. Is he reporting the news himself? Okay, yes. So Chris Geidner has gathered this up, and Matt is commenting on it. But the news is this. Joe Kent, the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, has resigned. Now, I'll tell you why in a minute, and Chris told you why in his post, but I'm leaving that out. But Matt Gertz is commenting that, by the way, I guess I'll just tell you. Chris Geidner says the resignation comes over the Iran war, which is interesting. We have mentioned in passing that there's a branch of MAGA that says, hey, what happened to whole America first? No endless wars, no forever wars, and Donald the Dove, Hillary the Hawk, what happened? And we figured, well, a lot of MAGA will give him a pass on doing whatever it is he wants to do, especially if they've caught his creeping psychopathy. But not everybody has. So, we saw from Murdery Trader Green, that's still who she is, objecting to the war. She's been very vocal and outspoken. It's just that nobody cares anymore because she's not in Congress, and nobody was really listening to her when she was just a Facebook influencer anyway. But it was a name. Now Joe Kent resigns over the Iran war. And before anybody gets the idea that he's doing it because he's principled, we'll point out what Matt Gertz points out, that under most circumstances, for one thing, you wouldn't want to lose the director of the National Counterterrorism Center 2 weeks after launching a war with Iran. However, Kent is a nut, and basically it's no skin off our nose to lose him here. His resignation letter to Trump accuses influential members of the American media of a disinformation campaign to deceive you, Trump, into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat. Our glorious leader is not wrong. He was misled by bad advice from everybody who was telling him don't do this. But he read it as do it, and that's your fault for being unclear. Now, there's more. As Matt gives it context, we'll read his letter, I guess. But Matt tells us this is basically a Tucker Carlson ally blaming Mark Levin and Sean Hannity for his departure from the National Counterterrorism Center. Matt concludes here by saying, on the one hand, it's true that Iran wasn't an imminent threat, and normally having someone in Kent's post say that would be significant, but on the other hand, he's a loon and a conspiracy theorist who was wildly unqualified for the position in the first place. And others making the comment that he somehow manages to make his comments in exiting anti-Semitic in a way, and essentially blaming Israel and Israeli agents in the United States for convincing the president that he had to enter this war, which may be true on a country to country basis. But there was a weird tinge of, you listened to the Jews, apparently, in this letter. I don't know. I haven't read the letter yet. We'll see whether we agree. It's here. There's both, Chris Geidner has both Kent's post on Twitter, which says, after much reflection, I've decided to resign from my position as director of the National Counterterrorism Center effective today, not 2 weeks. I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Okay. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. Okay. And it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel, probably true, and its powerful American lobby, also true, probably. It has been an honor serving under POTUS, not true, and DNI Gabbard, definitely not true, and leading the professionals at NCTC. May God bless America. Sure, why not? We'll see whether that happens anytime soon. Here's the letter. President Trump, after much reflection, probably not, I've decided to resign from my position as the director of National Counterterrorism Center effective today. I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war with Iran. You heard about that already. I support the values and the foreign policies that you campaigned on in 2016, 2020, when you lost, 2024, which you enacted in your first term, but not your second one. So, until June of 2025, you understood that the wars in the Middle East were a trap. It's a trap that robbed America of the precious lives of our patriots and depleted the wealth and prosperity of our nation. He's not going to be able to read this because there's not enough capital letters in it. In your first administration, you understood better than any modern president how to decisively apply military power without getting us drawn into never-ending wars. You demonstrated this by killing Qasem Soleimani and defeating ISIS. And Qasem Soleimani, of course, the general in Iran, which is essentially, we were going to get into this war eventually. Early in this administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States and that, should you strike now, there was a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie, and is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. We cannot make this mistake again. As a veteran who deployed to combat 11 times, and as a Gold Star husband who lost my beloved wife Shannon in a war manufactured by Israel, oh dear, I cannot support sending the next generation off to fight and die in a war that serves no benefit to the American people nor justifies the cost of American lives. I pray, probably really does, that you will reflect upon what you are doing in Iran and who we are doing it for. Oh, the time for bold action is now. Sure, why not? Throw that in there. You can reverse course. That would be a bold action. We surrender. You can reverse course and chart a new path for our nation, or you can allow us to slip further toward decline and chaos. You hold the cards. It was an honor serving your administration and to serve our great nation. And do you want fries with that? Joseph Kent, Director, National Counterterrorism Center. No, he isn't. That's funny. I resign immediately. Signed, Director of... No, you resigned. Although it does say effective today. Maybe at 5 p.m. today. So, all right. Well, technically, I thought it said effective immediately. That'd be kind of funny. Anyway, what can I tell you? It's not like Trump was going to be listening to anybody about what he had to say. So, what can I tell you? I just saw a funny picture go by here as... somebody says, my Kiss Me I'm Irish cookie didn't turn out as well as I would have liked. It's a smallish palm-sized cookie, and they put a little icing, tried to write "Kiss Me" in there, and I guess once it baked, the S is straightened out a little bit, and it looks like "Kill Me." It doesn't say "Kill Me," I'm Irish, but "Kill Me." All right. Well, I'm sure that wasn't what they intended. Let's see. Did I put any other fun? You know what? I saw a couple of other comments about this thing, including, this, all the comments about Joe Kent quitting, and then people talking about, the disagreements among MAGA Civil War. Here's an angle on the MAGA Civil War I wasn't anticipating, and it just happened to come across the screen. So interrupting this program, to our regularly scheduled program, to bring you this information. MAGA infighting ignites over accusation Trump staged assassination. Now, I've heard people make that claim before, whether seriously or as a joke. I've not seen it as a MAGA Civil War accusation. Although I guess I should have seen it coming, given that Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and Laura Loomer and several other weirdo right-wing figures are at war with one another over accusations surrounding the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So I guess if that can happen, just about anything can happen. This is in Alternet, written by Thomas Kika, K-I-K-A, Let's hear what's going on here. Infighting has erupted, as we know, amongst conservatives online after a major voice, we'll see about that, in the MAGA media sphere expressed belief in the conspiracy theory claiming that President Donald Trump staged his 2024 assassination attempt. You wouldn't have thought that they would go there in MAGA. This theory about the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania on the presidential campaign trail is not new, but has to date largely circulated among fringe left-wing sources. The accusation hinges on several aspects of the incident, including the lack of a scar left on Trump's ear, the situational wherewithal needed to defiantly raise his fist afterward, and the fact that the alleged gunman had supported him in the past, leading some to suspect that it was staged for political gain in an election that had existential stakes for Trump. Now, however, as Trump has made numerous decisions in his second term that have run afoul of his MAGA supporters, an increasing number of them have also begun to cast doubt on the official narrative surrounding his assassination attempt. Okay. One of the most prominent names so far has been far right pundit and influencer. I thought this guy was gone forever. Milo Yiannopoulos. All right, Milo. I hate myself for thinking it, but dude, that shit wasn't real. Yiannopoulos wrote, and he wrote with 2 dashes, S blank blank dash dash T. He wrote on Twitter, responding to another similarly skeptical user. There was no assassination attempt. It didn't happen. I'm just sorry. I'm sorry. It just didn't. I was going to say, I'm just sorry it didn't, go differently, let's say. As we learn more about the scam-filled life of Donald Trump. Oh, finally? All right. Why isn't there a serious investigation into the staged, quote, assassination attempt in Butler, PA? Another Twitter anti-Trump Republican user wrote in a post, that was the moment when Trump stole the 2024 election. Get after it, investigative journalists. America deserves the truth. I've never rewatched this clip until now. Hannah Cox, the self-described libertarian conservative and president of Based Politics, wrote in response to another user sharing a clip of the attempt from a news broadcast. Look at the people behind him and their reactions. No one on earth would sit there like that after a public shooting broke out. Compare this to the crowd and people around Charlie Kirk when he's shot. But I don't think anybody heard the gunshot right away, at least in Butler. I don't know. And I mean, look at the reaction around Trump. Like a guy behind him dying. That's hard to get past if you're doing the conspiracy theory thing. What a weird conspiracy. Somebody behind him has to die. But, they'll believe anything. In response to these skeptical conservative voices, infighting has broken out as others attempt to push back on their skepticism. President of Based Politics, who was never based, of course, suggesting Trump staged his own assassination attempt, Jeremy Carl, a senior fellow at the Claremont Institute, posted in response to Cox, these grifters and clowns, not unlike the ones at the Claremont Institute, can't leave the scenes fast enough for me. Another user, going by Brick Suit, attempted to shut down these theories by sharing their own front row footage from the Butler event itself. Oh, well, that'd be interesting. Trump's combative White House communications director shared their post, adding, "For those of us who were there with POTUS at Butler, anyone saying it was staged truly needs to have their heads checked out because they have no sense of reality." I wish some of those guys maybe had been closer to the action than they actually were. But I don't know. I mean, it's meaningless generally speaking, but I don't know. I guess just to keep track of what these lunatics are doing to one another. And you'll know if it ever breaks out into open warfare between them, something about the background and how crazy it was when the news reaches the mainstream, I guess. All right. Well, worth checking in on. We got another segment left after this next break. And, hey, maybe we'll get some news of the day in there as well, too. Or some background information that'll set us up for the rest of the week when Greg returns tomorrow. There's elections going on, after all.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's make our run at our final segment. By the way, I guess one of the news items much in discussion today really happened yesterday. Trump apparently, well, shall we read the New York Times article on it? Sure, why not? Trump claims an ex-president confided his regrets on Iran, but who? We wonder who. And maybe some dramatic music for that? Maybe that's it. Only really the music should be this. Trump claims an ex-president confided his regrets on Iran, but who? Or perhaps that's bullshit. That may be actually the best one about it. Anyway, the New York Times reached out to people close to President Trump's predecessors. They disputed Mr. Trump's claims, and I guess they'll tell you what the claims are. Chris Cameron wrote this up again for the New York Times. President Trump claimed on Monday that a former president told him privately that, quote, "I wish I did what you did," in attacking Iran and killing its supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. All right, Khamenei. Did I say that right? Okay, I don't know. I think they give it a little bit of that sound when they say it, or maybe more H-y, Khamenei. Anyway, that was no different at all, now that I think about it. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Mr. Trump would not identify which of the only four living predecessors he was referring to. And of course, basically, look, long story short, he's been caught out here. None of these guys said they talked to him, and no one would certainly admit it. And of course, none of the ex-presidents, if they did talk to Trump, would say, "I wish I did what you did." That's, of course, Trump describing what he says the conversation was. He may try and backtrack and say, "I didn't say it was an ex-president of the United States. I meant I talked to the president of the Rolex Corporation," or, I spoke to, a former president of another country. Or, as many people have pointed out, he's a former president. I talked to myself. And he has said a couple of times when they were asked him, "Who do you talk to for foreign policy advice?" Nobody. I talk to myself. I'm very smart. I have a very big brain. All right. Well, anyway, He says this. This is his quote. He said, "I wish I did what you did," Mr. Trump said. "I don't want to get into who." Put it in quotes. I don't want to get into who. I don't want to get him into trouble. But what would you get him into trouble for? Presidents have immunity. Oh, well, anyway. A reporter asked if it was President George W. Bush, the only Republican on the list, but Mr. Trump said no. I don't talk to that guy. He got us into forever wars. Well, there's no Democrat going to call him. I wish I did what you did. Nope. That would leave Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden, all Democrats. People close to all three men denied the former presidents had said that to Mr. Trump or spoken with him at all recently. They all spoke on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to publicly confirm the former president's private business. Still, go ahead. Go on the record. In this claim, Mr. Trump strongly suggested he was talking about a Democrat, saying the person was a member of a party that detests him. Although, to be honest, there are two parties in this country, and both detest him. So, whatever. Anyway, he said the former president was one who happens to like me, and I like that person who is a smart person. There is no such president. He didn't speak to anybody. It's a lie. They're chasing it down. They're working very hard to try to confirm it. Well, we tried to get people on the record to say whether or not they spoke to... Listen, there was no president that he talked to. No president is going to say, yeah, I wish I bombed Iran like you did, because no one wants to do anything like Trump did. There's just, it didn't happen. And they really need to get past this and just say this at some point. I mean, I don't know how many times they have to be fooled by this garbage before I understand they want to double check everything, but I mean, no one wants to talk about the pattern. No president told them this. There's no hospital ship going to Greenland. There's no tariff shelf to go looking for money. There's no tariff rebates like he promised he was going to use the tariff shelf for. There's not even a real system for tariff refunds yet. Just like there's no healthcare plan, there's no prescription plan, there's no invisible plane, there's no big strong guy with tears streaming down his eyes saying, sir, I want to kiss you so bad. None of this is true, and that's just this term. And there's a million other things from previous terms that people have pointed out. I mean, come on. I don't know. It's a grim situation that they're tied up in knots trying to figure out, well, which president was it? No, but he's making it up. You're chasing a hallucination. At best, it's a hallucination. That would be the best excuse he could give is, I have a serious mental problem. I hallucinated the whole thing. I'm seeking treatment. Or even if he doesn't, but at least knowing that it was a hallucination would be one thing. It's just him saying, I bet if I told these guys, they're all critical of me. They're all saying that I did the wrong thing. Well, guess what? I talked to another president who's from a party that hates me, so he has reason to lie about me. But does he lie? No, he says, I wish I did what you did. He's just, this is just someone, he's making up someone smart saying he did the right thing. And why, not only it was right, but it was so right that I wish I did it when I was president. I don't want to get this person in trouble. What trouble would there be? I mean, I guess if it was really true and a Democratic president said, I wish I had bombed Iran, then people would say, what are you doing? What are you saying that for? That's stupid. But that's not a lot of trouble. You just go, what do I care? I'm going to go, give a speech now for $1 million. Well, maybe there would be fewer of them. But look, none of these guys are going to be in trouble for saying this. Anyway, want to know how much else they write about this fake thing that actually didn't happen at all? I'll tell you. Trump has for years mocked all three former Democratic presidents and their accomplishments in speeches, social media posts, and even in a monument to American presidents that Mr. Trump had installed near the Oval Office last year. This is a good point. Mr. Trump's claim of support from a former president came even as he conceded on Monday that he had been, quote, shocked by Iran's retaliatory strikes in the war, which targeted U.S. allied states like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Kuwait. He added that there was no expert that would say that was going to happen. See, that also didn't happen. It is a hallucination as well. And equated the war to a big chess game at a very high level chess, the highest. Look for another word at some point. By the way, Condoleezza Rice recently at the White House, it was reported last week, although she was there for the, I guess, the sports round table. Whether the table's actually round, I don't know. And I'm not certain why they included her at all. But given that they knew they were moving the littoral combat ships with the mine countermeasure modules out of the Persian Gulf, they must have known what was going on. And there was, somebody that's sometimes pointed to as some kind of an expert. Did they ask Condoleezza Rice, do you think any former presidents would say they wish that they had bombed? And if they did, would they not have any minesweepers around and not worry? Because they're not going to close the Strait of Hormuz, right? Didn't bother with that. Anyway, oh yes, right, there's another paragraph left in this thing. Trump continued, I'm dealing with very smart players, he added. These are really smart people and violent people and vicious people and some very nice people. And some are very nice but violent. They turned violent. And that is the last quote. And if that doesn't tell you that the guy is out of his mind and doesn't know what the effing F he's talking about and he's making it up as he goes along, I don't know what else to tell you. Was it a hallucination or was it made up? I can't promise it wasn't a hallucination. I hope it was a hallucination, but I think it was just made up. How do I, why do I say so? Just the last quote. What is he talking about? I'm dealing with some very smart players. They're smart and violent. Smart and violent. Oh, smart and violent and vicious. That sounds weird. I don't want you to talk to violent and vicious people about what to do about this war. Well, some of them are very nice. But how can that be? They're vicious and violent, but nice? Well, some are very nice, but violent. Well, that's not nice then. Well, they turned violent. I mean, this is him trying to dig out of the hole that he dug for himself in the same statement. Just trying to justify it. Well, I don't understand any of this stuff, sir. It doesn't make any sense. Well, I talk to smart people, and they're smart, but also vicious and violent, so they know about war. That's what makes them vicious and violent. Yeah, but you don't want vicious and violent. Maybe, strategic thinkers and militarily capable. Why don't you put it in terms like that? Well, some of them are nice also. Okay. But do you want their advice necessarily? Well, they're nice but violent, but the good kind of violent. They turned violent because of how patriotic they were. None of this happened. Just say so already. I don't know what to... I can't give you any different advice. Clearly, they're not listening to it. Will there ever be a turning point? I don't think so. I watched Nuremberg last night. Very popular movie on Netflix, and always eye-opening. Although I certainly know the story of the Nuremberg trials, it was very fascinating and lots of insight. And I presume that they meant this to be the case. A lot of insight possibly into what's going on now. I was, of course, particularly struck by one of the scenes in which Justice Jackson attempting, still doing the work of trying to convince the powers that be in the United States and among the allies that these trials should even take place rather than just summary execution for top Nazis. And that they should try and do this thing. One of the important reasons being he wanted to lay out the history of what the Nazis and what Germany had done during the war and the conditions that led them to feeling like they could and should do that. And he points out, we defeated Germany, a militarized imperial Germany in World War I, and we thought we would come down on them like a ton of bricks and punish them and humiliate them, and that would prevent them, that would be the fix. Well, if we just make it so embarrassing and costly and humiliating to have started such a war and lost it, that will convince them of the idiocy, the foolishness of going down this path again. But as he points out, 20 years later, they had in fact rearmed and were preparing for war again, and we were right back where we started 20 years later, back in another world war. And this time, they very nearly conquered the world. I mean, they certainly conquered Europe, and the intent was to conquer the world. And the United States manages with the Allies a victory. I mean, you might say by the skin of their teeth, it wasn't always a given. Looking back on it, it's a fait accompli because we read it as a history book. But at the time, we didn't know that we were going to win this thing. And he points out, like, it only took them 20 years to go from one to the next. Are we going to be back here in 15 years, 20 years, if we don't lay out what happened here and what made this round of the war different? What made the Nazis different from the Imperial Germans the first time around? Whatever it is. We've seen how quickly they turn around from utter humiliation, at least, and defeat, and then turn around and nearly conquer the world again. We really need to lay down some markers here, or we may find ourselves back here doing it again. And he makes this very interesting comment. So basically, I don't know if we can defeat this a third time. I mean, basically saying we got lucky twice. Will the world defeat Germany or some other fascist movement a third time? And of course, now it isn't Germany, but are we going to have to deal with a fascist threat another round? And is the third time the charm for international right-wing fascism? I don't know. I hope not. But it was a good point. And, so he was saying, well, we really need to lay out the facts but also hold people accountable in a legalistic fashion, and then put a period on the last sentence of the war this way, right? So if we're going to execute people, do it legalistically, but also use the opportunity to show people why we're doing it this way and why the world should unite against this. It was very interesting. And also very interesting is, of course, the examination, the cross-examination of Goering, in which Jackson is a little bit stymied here, but he gets rescued by the British prosecutor, whose name I can't recall because I'm not British. But if I was British, I'd probably have difficulty recalling Jackson's name, maybe. I don't know. I comfort myself that way. No, they probably know exactly who Jackson is. Anyway, he puts a set of questions to Goering, and I don't know how historically accurate it is. I don't remember how the cross-examination tape went. But he runs down the accounting of the death camps and talking about the number of people killed. And all this time, he is the Reichsmarshal, the second in command to Hitler. And his claim is, I didn't know they were doing that. I thought that they were building work camps. And that's what I would have approved of, as work camps. But I never would have approved of extermination camps. And at best, it was, I didn't really care what happened to the Jews. It's just I wouldn't have necessarily advocated for this solution. And he's now trying to escape accountability by saying, I actually didn't want that. And I didn't know about it. So basically, he lays out all the facts and says it's kind of hard to believe that the second in command to Hitler doesn't know this is happening. But given that we do know that now, and that we've established what these numbers are and the people who died and where they died and when they died, and that they died as a result of orders you agreed to sign, and we've now seen the video evidence of those murders. Now, and this is where the psychiatrist's investigation into his mind pays off. He knows to ask the question, given what we know about the history of the war now, given what we know about what happened in the concentration camps, would you follow Adolf Hitler as your Führer today if he were still alive? And they do know that, given the psychological profile of these guys, he's got to say yes, and does. And that seals the case. But it also seals the relevance for us here in modern times. Despite the Joe Kents of the world and the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, Murdery Trader Greens of the world, there are a few. There's always going to be some that get peeled off. But there's also a core that never drops it. And, Greg has described this phenomenon 100 times. They're crazy, but you can always get 25% of the people, and I guess if you actually make it to the presidency, 30-ish% of people to say yes to the craziest stuff in the world. And that also is the point of the psychiatrist in the movie, that there is such a core in every country, all over the place, even America, even though people didn't want to believe it. But more to the point, I think, one, this can come back and come back quickly. And two, that there may never be, there probably will never be any aha moment where the whole body of true believers says, my eyes are open. Sure, there'll be some people who just never open their eyes, but even the majority of this narrow slice of what's now MAGA America, there's never going to be a point, not on the campaign trail, not in a courtroom, not in a Midwestern diner, no matter how earnest, no matter how many earnest questions they're asked by New York Times reporters visiting the zoo. They are not going to admit the error of their ways. They're not going to abandon their charismatic leader. That is the lesson of the historical chapter and its description in the movie. And there's only one way out of it. And at a minimum, there are variants of the one way, I guess, subdivisions of the one way. But total and utter defeat and laying out the depravity is what it's going to take. And I've spoken to a former president myself, and he says, I wish I did it your way. I wish I did it the way you told me to do it in May of 2009 when you came to the White House and told me, okay, it's the wrong impression. But, I find that it's interesting now that Obama is a lot more receptive to, I'm sure he has no recollection whatsoever of having heard this, certainly from me. But in May of 2009, when I got my chance to sit at the table, I said, and I've told you this before, listen, you don't mark out your territory and show everybody legalistically that the depravities, which did not approach Nazi depravity, I don't think, for the most part, in any way, shape, or form, although nobody knows what they did torture-wise in some of these prisons under the George W. Bush administration. But indefinite detention, warrantless surveillance, torture, all of these things, the line needed to be drawn. The depravity needed to be demonstrated, no matter how far it went, and no matter how much space there still may have been between them and Nazi Germany, and there was considerable space. You had to draw the line and show that the United States doesn't do this, doesn't tolerate it when it is done. They do it, doesn't tolerate it for long anyway. When it is done, you've turned the corner. It can't just be brief interruptions in our march to Republican-led fascism with interregnums when Democrats restore the rule of law temporarily. You have to show that it's a permanent thing, or else, and maybe even if you do show it's a permanent thing, it will still happen, that the very next Republican administration, it may be that we can't influence them at all, but we do have to try. If you don't try, then you definitely won't influence them at all. But the very next Republican administration will pick up just where George W. Bush left off, and they will go so far off the deep end, your head'll spin, Trump would have said. They will do all of this and worse, and it will be because Democrats and the rest of the country gave no indication that they were ever going to push back, no matter how far it went, even to the point of having a Supreme Court say, what the hell, you're not even allowed to push back. Presidents have absolute immunity before, during, and after their presidency as necessary. And that isn't really a doctrine. A, that's not a real doctrine. B, that's not a doctrine. They won't even tell you now that they mean that for every president. They might tell you now, wink, wink, yeah, every president. But honestly, no, it'll be Republicans. First of all, Democrats will never approach the line because they're the interregnum. Now, we're going to restore the rule of law, and consciously so, but only for the time being. But anyway, even if they wanted to exercise that kind of power, no, this Supreme Court would not permit that for partisan reasons. So I don't know. I thought it was a very important thing to add to all of that. More information before we close out for the day. Ryan Goodman has brought us this. Of course, Ryan Goodman of Just Security has something more to say about Joe Kent, the guy who just resigned from the Counterterrorism Center. The Iran war was a bad idea from the start, says Ryan, but Joe Kent is not the right messenger on this. See his alleged associations with Nick Fuentes and a live streamer who said Hitler was a complicated historical figure which many people misunderstand, to bring things back to Hitler for no apparent reason. This a letter from a joint letter from the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Western States Center, an excerpt from a paper of theirs, and I guess that is, let's see. I imagine it's here for the associations with white nationalists, but we might as well read the preceding paragraph as well. I don't know what the header there is, but we sort of pick up in the middle of the litany here. Mr. Kent in 2021 described Islam as based on conquest at its core. In other comments, he has conflated support for Palestinian human rights with support for the terrorist group Hamas. Some people have made that mistake. Smearing political figures as pro-Hamas. Given Mr. Kent's stated intent to prioritize Islamist terrorism as NCTC director, this Islamophobic bigotry is especially concerning, especially because the United States intelligence community has a long history of warrantless surveillance, I just said that, and civil rights violations targeting Arab and Muslim Americans, and a bunch of others too. The NCTC director must be an individual who can be trusted to uphold the civil rights and liberties of all Americans, including Muslim and Arab Americans, and Mr. Kent is not that person. So clearly an Islamophobia section. Then on to associations with white nationalists, violent groups, and anti-democracy actors. Mr. Kent cannot be... are you a lady, Mr. Kent? No, you're not. Shakespeare in Love there for just a moment. Mr. Kent cannot be relied upon to appropriately assess and act on international far-right hate and extremism as the director of NCTC. And it is counterterrorism, right? There's a lot of right-wing terrorism. This all given his associations, of course, with the movement here in the U.S. In other words, Fox guarding the henhouse. Mr. Kent participated in a call discussing campaign social media strategy with white nationalist and anti-Semite Nick Fuentes. Kent also criticized Twitter's move to deplatform Fuentes, tagging him in a Twitter post. In June of 2022, Mr. Kent gave an interview to Grayson Arnold, a live streamer who once referred to Hitler as a complicated historical figure, which many people misunderstand. In both cases, Kent disavowed the figures and claimed he did not know who they were prior to interaction with them. During his 2022 run for Congress, Kent invited far-right Patriot Prayer founder Joey Gibson to speak at a campaign rally and introduced him with the phrase, with praise. Patriot Prayer is a far-right group active in the Pacific Northwest that has hosted and promoted rallies in progressive cities like Portland, frequently engaging in violence against their political opponents. Patriot Prayer rallies have regularly included the Proud Boys, paramilitary groups, white nationalists, and other anti-government extremist groups at a time when the FBI, DHS, and NCTC have all identified white supremacist and anti-government actors as the most lethal domestic terror threat to the United States. And when a 2022 Senate Homeland Security report confirmed that the most recent domestic terror attacks have come from these groups, Mr. Kent's record is not only deeply troubling, it raises serious concerns about his willingness or ability to take these threats seriously. So it's just fine that he's gone, but of interest because it also evidences intra-MAGA tensions. Ryan adds some more notes here. Note who Kent blames for the Iran war and the Iraq war in his resignation letter. He gives a link to the full text of the SPLC and Western States Center letter as well, and reiterates that Kent seems determined to blame the Iran war on the Jews in general, though he is disguising it as, I guess, an Israel attack. Okay, let's see. Any other things? Well, we're really close to having to call it quits for the day, but at least we have lots of time left this week. Tomorrow we'll be digesting, I guess, results from Illinois' congressional primaries, including the hotly contested is in Illinois 9th district, in which that's been closely watched, and a lot of last-minute accusations and barbs being traded for sure. That's the one where I think the most talked about in online progressive circles has been, and I think we got the pronunciation right. I've just learned to pronounce her name, so I don't know. If she loses her primary, I won't have to say Kat Abu Ghazala. It's not my original interpretation of rhyming with Avuvuzela. I thought it was Abu Ghazala, but it's not. Kat Abu Ghazala. Okay. So anyway, I've just learned the name just in time to find out that the primary ends today, and we'll have probably some results tomorrow, and we'll digest those with Greg when he comes around. All right, let's see. Is there anything else that I can squeeze in or just need to drop a hint about being talked about tomorrow? No. I think basically that's it. Now, as it happens, I would ordinarily give this time over. Oh, I do have something else to say. To the description of Justice Putnam's West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, which usually follows us today. But I think he's got personal business today. And let's see, has he given me some indication of what might be coming up next? Well, he was listening and he gave me the notes on Jeffrey Lawrence's portrayal of. Are we saying? I don't get anything else. Lead Brit Nuremberg judges, Sir Jeffrey Lawrence. Okay. And then I was like, is he telling me the name? Is this the name of the actor who played him or not? All right. I guess not. Okay. I'm not real clear on all of that, but not a great way to end the show. It sounds so dumb when we do things this way. At any rate, he's got some St. Patrick's Day info and programming to take place of the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy today, as I understand it. I was going to say, we did have one more thing. Greg Bovino is finally out. Has announced his retirement. He was like reassigned, and everybody in the administration tried to pretend that this was planned or actually something amazing and awesome, or maybe even a promotion for him. But basically, they sent him home from Minnesota in disgrace, and then they allowed a decent interval to pass before saying, "Oh, by the way, actually, he's retiring entirely." But I'm sure it was totally his choice. And I mean, maybe it's not that they won't give him a reward or anything, but obviously this is a
From
decent interval fire.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, like I said, we'll be back tomorrow. Greg will be with us. He's gone away. He will come back tomorrow. Collect all the information from the many primaries. I don't think any special elections happening today, but you never know. They seem to be happening every week. We'll be back for this and the balance of the week tomorrow and going forward. See you then.